Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to pop in here to the webinar. We've got about 40 people here already, so we should have a good crowd today. In the meantime, if you want to scan that QR code with your camera on your phone, that'll take you to our LinkedIn page, and you can follow us. That way you stay up to date when there's new webinars, and we release other checklists and resources that can be of help to you in your personal careers. All right, so I'll pop back in here in just a minute as we allow people to jump into the session. Okay, we've got several more people joining us. Want to thank you again for joining us today for How Did the FDA Change in 2021? This is our annual presentation where we take our analysis of the FDA's top 43s that we've collected over the last 8 years and analyze them to see trends and insights into the FDA. First off, if you just joined, you can scan that QR code and it'll take you to our LinkedIn page. You can follow us, that way you don't miss anything when we do future presentations. And secondly, everyone tomorrow should be receiving, about tomorrow afternoon, a copy of this recorded presentation. We will not be sending out the slides, but we will be sending out the recording. If at any time during today's presentation you would like to ask questions, we will be answering them about the last 15 minutes of the session. And you can type those in on your menu screen for GoToMeeting, and we will answer those. If you have any technical issues during this time, you can feel free. I'll be monitoring questions for that as well. All right, so let's get rolling today with an introduction to our presenter. Today's presenter, if you've been with our sessions in the past, you know her very well. It is Regina Folan, and she is our VP of RAQA Consulting. Regina assists clients in medical device and pharmaceutical industries to help them achieve ever-increasing compliance to regulations in pharma, medical device, and related industries. Within her role here, Regina uses her writing skills, her presenting skills, her mounds and mounds of knowledge on the subject matter to create relevant and meaningful articles to help you stay current with regulatory changes, industry trends, and improve your product quality and processes. Regina has many certifications. Here's some of them. She is a certified quality engineer, certified quality auditor, certified manager of quality organizational excellence with ASQ, and she also holds a regulatory affairs certification for medical devices with RAPS. So she is always full of knowledge, full of learning. We are so glad to have her with us today and have you with us as well. So without further ado, here's Regina.
Thank you, Val. Great introduction. Thank you so much for putting this together. And thank you, audience, for attending, because without you, I wouldn't be able to be here. So the first thing I want to dig into is the session objectives. I'm going to summarize what the current publicly available data on the FDA website says about the top 43 observations for pharmaceuticals and medical device. Yes, there are other industry sectors, but we're not analyzing them here. But even if you're not in those industry sectors, like for instance, you're in cannabis, you probably want to prepare for your eventual regulation. Then we're going to do like a comparative analysis of the 483s against what they've been performing in the past. So you can understand how those 483 observations kind of show how the FDA's thought processes are evolving over time. And that, my friend, will help you to identify what you need to do so you can use a risk-based assessment to anticipate the questions that the FDA is going to ask you at their next inspection. And that will help you to avert those 483 observations that are so commonly found. So we're going to cover a lot of ground, so let's just get moving here. So last year, COVID impacted the FDA inspections, and so did it in 2020. So you can see that in 2020, for devices, it was originally 422 findings, and in 2021, it went down even more to 191, where before it was like 822. So if you look at it, we're probably down to a quarter of the number of regulatory findings in 2021 than they had in 2019. And more than half of them were taken away. So we had a half decrease here and a half decrease there. Same thing if we look at drugs. We started out with 779 findings in 2019, went down to 349 findings in 2020, and down to 215 findings in 2021. There's a lot of pandemic effect. However, and I want to say this, the FDA is planning on going back to doing inspections again. I attended a webinar that was given by one of the district heads of the FDA. And at least he's more in the food sector, but he said they're going to resume normal inspections starting very soon, probably in, March, April, May timeframe. The other thing I want to point out, though, is that you look at the denominators in here. These 2811 and 2430, these are not going to be the same number that I'm going to be using as denominators for calculating the top 10 483s. And the reason why is this table only accounts for the things that are in the FDA's system called Turbo EIR. There's a whole bunch of manually written 483s that are not made in their Turbo system that will constitute the denominator for my other things that we're going to be delving into deeper. So getting into it, we're going to start with pharmaceuticals. And pharmaceuticals, there's a tie for 10th or 11th place. The first one is for controls that for validating variability or in training. Okay, so that's 10 or 11. Then 9, we have calibration as a finding. Calibration doesn't just need to be done, it needs to be done according to a written program. Then we have microbial contamination for drugs purporting to be sterile. This one's very important. So if your product is labeled as being sterile, you had better have procedures for assuring sterility and that you're following. The next one is Making sure that your equipment is suitable. What this really is saying is you need to be doing equipment qualification. Then we have computer system. Okay, so we're talking about here data integrity. We're also talking about doing computer system validation. Number 5 is for cleaning, sanitizing, again, cleaning validation, but making sure that that's appropriate for its intended use. And then for number 4, we have laboratory controls to establish that we are sampling correctly, that we, again, this is another data integrity issue, because if your laboratory instruments have data integrity issues, you cannot show that you are conforming for sure. So that's 4 through, well, 10 or 11. And now the top 3. Production and process controls. Number 3, big one. I mean, basically you have to have a written procedure and you need to have some sort of a way of being able to assure that you meet all of the requirements of identity, strength, quality, purity. Number 2 is failure to thoroughly review discrepancies. This means you have a procedure for investigation, and although they do not call this that in the drug world, CAPA. And then the number 1 problem is that companies sometimes do not have a quality unit or do not have procedures for the quality unit, or what is the most common is that they have a quality unit in name only, and the quality unit does not have any authority to assure that all the procedures are being followed as written. So the top 3, these top 3 make up 15% of the observations that the FDA makes. That means that if you got these top 3, you know, you've mitigated 15% of your risk. And we know for sure that the FDA is going to be looking at these 3 things if you're a pharmaceutical facility. The top 10, or should I say 11, make up 31% of your observations. So that means that if you have addressed all top 11, you're close to mitigating 1/3 of any risks that you may have. Now that doesn't sound like much, but when you know that the FDA is going to be coming and looking at these specific findings, it's best to be prepared. So now I'm going to go into devices. And the devices, oh wait, first I want to talk about the comments on the 210 and 211. The quality unit finding for number 1 has been in the number 1 spot for the last 8 years. It's incredible, incredible consistency. Your quality unit better have procedures, better be present, and better be empowered. And then the investigation of discrepancies has been either at number 2 or number 3 for at least the last 7 years. So that's very significant too. Again, in the device world, we call this CAPA. So if you don't have a CAPA program in your pharmaceutical system, you would at least have an investigation system. And a newcomer to this list is the design of manufacturing equipment. Again, design of manufacturing equipment ties in very, very closely to IQ/OQ for validation of equipment, to verify that your design is suitable for its intended use. And data integrity is important. It seems like we've touched on it a few times with the computer systems and with the laboratory systems. So it's in there. So now we go into devices. So Tide, again, they're top 10 and top 11. I don't know why this year we happen to have the top 10 including 11 for both, but we do. So devices, a device master record had not been adequately maintained. A device master record, of course, is the list of all the specifications associated with your device. That includes your recipes, it includes your labeling, anything that has to do with definition of what your device is. Risk analysis was not performed, is inadequate, and is complete. Risk analysis. So now we are going with a risk-based, science-based approach. We want to look at risk. That means that if you are not already using ISO 134 or 14971, you need to. Complaints. The FDA complains a lot about complaints. Look at these numbers, these frequency numbers. There's not many. FDA did not do many inspections. So, you know, look at 14, 16, whatever. Okay. The next one is procedures for acceptance activities. That means your final release testing, your in-process testing. Have you actually established some kind of acceptance activities? The FDA says that a process whose output that has not been fully verified via inspection and test shall be validated. So this means that you need to have full inspection. That means not based on sampling unless you have done a validation. Procedures have not been established to control product that does not conform to specified requirements. This is not just about segregation of product into some kind of quarantine area, but this is also about your CAPA system in a way. And again, we're kind of following the same thing with the acceptance activities. Now, a process whose results cannot be fully verified by subsequent inspection and test has not been adequately validated according to established procedures. So FDA is looking for validation also on the device side. And then CAPA. Corrective and preventive action activities and or results have not been adequately documented. The FDA has 7 steps to CAPA, and a review of the CFR, and I don't know why I have the incorrect citation there, but a review of the correct of the CFR will tell you that you do need to have CAPA. So 131 of the 775 observations are from top 11 to top 5. That's 17%. Now for the top 3, top 4 in this case. So we have procedures ensuring all purchased product and received product and services conform to requirements have not been adequately established. That means you have to have a good supplier quality program. That means you evaluate your suppliers according to some risk-based, science-based evaluation, and that you are doing some kind of acceptance activities for product as it comes in. If you need to sample and test it before it comes in, that's what you need to do, or you have some kind of procedures. You don't just buy it and use it. And written MDR procedures have not developed, maintained, and again, I put in the incorrect reference. 803.17 is about MDRs. Medical device reports. This means adverse events or events that would result in an adverse event were it to recur need to be reported to the FDA. Additionally, you will need to report do a summary report of those MDRs at the end of the year if you had any over the past year. 820.198A, procedures for receiving, reviewing, and evaluating complaints. Another complaints. FDA is complaining about complaints. And then number 1, CAPA. CAPA, CAPA, CAPA. We got 2 for CAPA. We got 3 for complaints if you count the MDRs. FDA is kind of important, complains about complaints and medical device records and CAPA all the time. So the top 4 make up a quarter of your observations. The top 10 make up 41% of your observations. What this means is you can mitigate nearly half of your risk just by being aware of these top 10 and being able to anticipate that the FDA is going to ask these questions, and you already have prepared the documentation you are going to show that provides the evidence that you have been doing your job. So the comments on these, CAPA, 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 it's been in the number 1 spot for at least 9 years. If you don't have a CAPA system, probably shouldn't be in the medical device business. Same thing for complaints. FDA complains about complaints. It's been in the number 2 spot for at least 9 years. Consistency. The FDA is very consistent about what they look for. 3 times they complained about complaints, and now they're kind of looking at this, risk-based approach for design control. They're looking at risk. What is your risk management file saying? How are you managing risk? How are you assuring that the product is safe based on risk? So we're going to play with our little poll thingy in our system here. You'll see that there's a poll. I'm going to launch it. And if you were inspected next week, how well do you feel your organization would perform against the top 10? And there are 4 selections you can make based on this. I'm launching the question right now. It's either you're very confident, meaning you know exactly what you got to do. You're confident, maybe you feel there's a few gaps. You're so-so, you don't want to make any commitments, or you're concerned. And this is just purely for self-reflection. We don't use this data for anything. We're not gonna go tattle. We don't care. We don't know. You can be honest here, and that way we can, we're really just trying to gauge your needs in this poll. I'm going to close the poll in 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now. And what we are at is we got 22% are very confident, 34% are confident, 42% are so-so, and 2% are concerned. I do see a lot of 43% so-so. And that to me tells me that you're being honest with yourselves. And that's okay, that's why we're in this webinar together. We're going to learn some things, and hopefully you can take this recording back to your organizations and maybe teach them some things. So moving on. Do we know if the FDA has a new focus? And I normally like to use trend charts like this. Of course, if you're doing a management review, you're doing management responsibility, you're probably using trend charts to evaluate your error rates or your trend rates. But we can't use this type of trend analysis when we're, well, we could, but when we're evaluating so many different variables. So we're going to kind of superimpose a lot of these trends. But you don't really know if the FDA is shifting focus until you can see. Now, we pretty much are sure that those top #1 and #2 findings are very, very, very consistent over all 8 years that we've been doing this. But to really know whether the FDA is trying to change their thinking, we need to use a trend chart. So I'm going to launch this to you, and it looks very messy because it is, but I'm going to try to give you some context around it as I show it. And the first thing we're going to do is in the pharma. Now, this does look really messy. One thing I want to point out in this is that when you see a lot of these crisscrosses, what that means is that those are things that are leaving the top 10 with new things joining the top 10. So these are going away and these are coming in. And you will see that when they come in at the 10 level. They're not coming in at the 5 level unless you're talking about something like this one. So you want to look at those things. Now, interestingly enough, 2017, I don't know if you recall this, but the year 2017 was a transition year for the FDA. The FDA did a full-scale reorganization effort where they took their inspectors and put them into their areas of specialization, where they organized. So you had foods inspectors, and you had pharma inspectors, and you had device inspectors, and even within, for instance, device, you might have people who were doing class 3 implantable devices, which would be separate inspectors from other device types. Then we kind of come over to this more current area. And this more current area is, your pandemic era. And you don't see a lot of crisscrosses here. You see maybe one. But for the most part, we're staying very, very consistent across the #1 and #2 findings. This was a 2 or 3. And you find a little bit of changes. So if you were going to ask me if the FDA changed its focus, I would say probably not. But the other thing that we have working against us is we do not have the inspection frequency as much as we did before. And why is that? Pandemic, first of all. And second of all, the FDA, when they do an inspection during the pandemic, they are focusing on the areas of greatest concern. They are looking at things that are potentially public health issues, and we'll get into that later, what the FDA was looking at as far as public health issues. We're looking at the device. We might see a little more crisscrossing here. And this purple line, let's see, what is that? That's a 20.30. It's kappa. I think we had more kappa involved. I would still say that we're not seeing huge changes. We have some things that shifted from one spot to another. Here we had little things that changed from one spot there. 820.22 left. Let me see, this is this one, 820.25B was here and then left. That's and it came to like #9. That's not really significant either. So I would say that we're pretty consistent. Look at this, we got #1 and 2 straight across the whole time. And then we got this one that's on there. consistently. That's a 20.50. We're pretty consistent. So what goes, of course, the 483 is the first step. If the FDA feels that you're sufficiently unrepentant, the FDA will issue a warning letter. Now, most warning letters are escalations of a 483. But in this case, this year in 2021, the warning letters where the FDA had public health concern, the vast majority had to do with misbranded product, the failure of a product to be consistent with its labeling, family smoking prevention, making sure that a tobacco product is properly distributed, or specific misbranding with regard to COVID. And these are situations where a dietary supplement is making label claims saying that it can prevent COVID, it cures COVID, or there's inadequate evidence to support that a hand sanitizer can protect, or face masks that were really meant for just everyday wear, having COVID claims. These are the types of things that the FDA was focusing on in 2021. They were not really looking at medical device and pharma during a public health crisis like we were having. So you can't really go necessarily on the data that the FDA has changed focus as far as medical devices and pharma, because their change of focus was on the pandemic, not on specifically medical device and pharma. It's going to change because the FDA is going back to doing their regular inspections, but for right now, it's where it is. So it's not really inspection based. So we had a fluke year in 2020, and we continued to have a fluke year in 2021. And I think that right now we're starting to get back to normal. And that the risks that we identified in your top 10 43s are probably valid, especially now that the inspectors are getting back into the field and doing their inspections again. But what did we learn? We learned CAPA, complaints, risk management, and data integrity are the high priorities. So better be prepared there. So now we have another poll that I'm going to push out. Do you know what your organization now needs to do based on this? So I'm going to push it out. I'm hoping that now that we have that priority of CAPA, complaints, risk analysis, and data integrity, those 4 priorities are really high to the FDA, that kind of gives you a guidance as to what you do need to do. But again, if you need help being able to identify what that really means in your organization, that's what we're here for. Again, we're not trying to sell you here. We just want to have this be a period of introspection for you to think about what your organization needs, how you're going to address it. Every company's answer is going to be a little bit different based on where they are, what their procedures dictate, what type of product they make. Class 3 implantable device is going to have very different priorities than a pharmaceutical over-the-counter drug. We understand that. It runs the gamut. The encouraging thing that I see here, and I'm going to close the poll in about 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and share the results. That only 2% of you said that you didn't know what you needed to do. That's really encouraging. 28% somewhat. That's what teams are for. Then you had 2 yeses. Yes, you got yes, but 32%, or yes, but 38%, and yes, you're really sure. And you're going to go show this presentation to your leadership and maybe get some input on what you can do. And that's excellent. Again, even if you have the somewhat in there, that's encouraging, because sometimes you can brainstorm things with a group and really get a really good idea. So I have now come to the end of the presentation, but I would really like to see some of your questions and answer some of them. And I don't know if we have any questions. I'm hoping that this person got some support, but all I see here is somebody had some audio issues. But that's all I have. Does anybody have questions, or maybe
I think there's going to be some questions coming in. As we're waiting for a few more questions to come in, and I think they usually trickles in, and then it's like a flood every year as people start kind of thinking and digesting. There's a lot of data there, obviously. This is something we've been tracking for over 8 years, and we love being able to bring this trend data to you each year. If any of you are interested and haven't done so yet, you can go to complianceteamllc.com. There should be a pop-up that happens when you get there, but you can also go to our resources library directly at the top. And in there, we have the downloadable top 10 483s of 2021. It's a great supplement. I will also include that link in our follow-up email, but if you want that right now, you can head over to complianceteamllc.com, grab that copy. It's not a copy of this presentation, but it is a copy of the top 10 that we put together every year, PDF. All right, it looks like we are getting a few different questions coming in here, and we're going to get rolling and answer as many as we could. Oh, good. Audio issue resolved. Excellent. That's what we like to hear. I know it's quirky with the settings in all these online meeting platforms. They all have different settings. All right. Someone, I can answer this one actually, Regina. Someone asked if we'll get a recording or PowerPoint. We will be sending a video recording of this entire session out to you guys. It's a bit tricky we don't usually convert this to PDF because we have all the little boxes over top of the questions and things. So we will be sending out the video recording of this, and don't forget about the top 43 summary that you can get from complianceteamllc.com. We'll also include a link to that as well. Let's see here. So we have a lot of questions. Regina, I guess if you want to start with pick one and go from there.
Question was asking about my thoughts on data integrity. So data integrity is especially important to the FDA when you're talking about laboratory data systems. They want to be sure that the data that you're getting off of your instrument is truly reflected in your test results, and that you have established controls in place to ensure that that data cannot be edited from its original form into your system. Now, it gets even more complicated if you're talking about an HPLC system where you have different algorithms for being able to calculate that data. And the FDA calls that dynamic data. And that the result that you see is not necessarily the raw data, but some sort of calculated result. So they want to make sure that you're not just recalculating the results until you get the answer you like. So that's an important thing with data integrity. Data integrity is also important when you're discussing original paper records. They want to see that you can see the original data. There's no scratch outs, no pencil, and no whiteout or any type of method to obliterate the original data that was recorded. All data should be recorded in real time as it happens. So if you measure a pH, you're not writing it on a Post-it pad and then transcribing it into the batch record, but you're writing it directly into the batch record as you perform the test. And ideally, you'd want to have a pH meter that can actually print the results, and so you can attach them so you can show that that was truly the pH that you measured, et cetera, et cetera. So there will be validation requirements, of course, to show that, for instance, your pH meter prints the results that it really registered, or that your HPLC properly calculated or recorded the results that you have in your test. I hope that answers it, but data integrity is a long process. There is a guidance document on the FDA website that gets into more details. Compliance team also has a downloadable resource, a data integrity checklist that you can use so you can evaluate your own systems on data integrity. Can you read me another one, Val? Because I'm having a hard time scrolling through these. Oh, so Connor was asking about making copies too. You can make copies. Copies are fine. What the FDA expects is that if you're making copies of something, that you, and let's say you're using the copy for certifying something rather than the actual hard copy, that you're doing some kind of a verification to confirm that the copy that you're making is a true representation of what's in the original document. That, like, when you made a copy, you didn't have maybe something that was faint didn't actually come through, and that faint information might not have shown. The other things that we see is a lot of companies require that things be in blue or black ink. I think that black used to be the standard. I think we're moving toward blue, because blue is a lot easier to be able to tell whether it's a copy or whether it's original. Okay. I'm having a hard time reading these because I can only see one line at a time.
No problem. You can bounce that out too if that helps, Regina. So I was answering a couple questions over chat myself. Were you starting from the top or the bottom? Let's start from the earliest, latest.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you name? Let's see here. That's like a Jeopardy question. Can you name the top 3 issues again? CAPA, data integrity, and if you I already answered this one, skip over it, Regina. Sorry.
Okay.
So they're looking for the top 3 issues again: CAPA, data integrity, and they were wondering about the third one.
Complaints. And what did I say? CAPA, data integrity, complaints. And now I'm blanking out, even though I said it a million times. Let's see there. Oh, and data. risk management.
All
I mean, we
right.
still have to do quality unit. Quality unit's important. If you don't have a quality unit, you shouldn't be in the business, but, okay, next one.
Awesome. I did answer this, I think, to everyone. Again, you're going to be getting a recording of the session sometime tomorrow afternoon. I'll make sure to include a couple helpful links. I'll include the data integrity link. I also put that in conversation to everyone, as well as the link to our top 10. So just, I got that question a couple times. Just want to revisit that for a second. And then next question, within the complaints category, what were the particular kinds of weaknesses, failures identified?
Okay, so for complaints, there's a few things that the FDA identifies a lot. First of all, is you have to have a written procedure, and you have to be following it. You need to be reviewing your complaints to ensure that the complaint, determine whether the complaint actually had some kind of hazard that would be fed into either reportability, meaning you have to report as an MDR because it indicated an adverse event or a likelihood of an adverse event, and whether that complaint is signaling some kind of a recall. What you're basically saying is every complaint is an opportunity for you to see if your product is a public health hazard. These evaluations need to be documented, and the FDA is going to review them and determine whether you are making an accurate judgment as to their reportability, their public health status in this review. So keep record of every complaint. This includes, and sometimes does not get reviewed, service records. So if you have a company that and your product is something that is like a machine that gets set up in the hospital, and you get a call from the hospital saying, I need you to repair this. That is a complaint. That is not just a service request, it is a complaint and needs to be evaluated as such. And those are where the big misses are.
Okay, great question. What are your thoughts about data integrity, and will we find many more findings for that in particular?
Yeah, I kind of gave the rundown about data integrity already. I think that was Connor's question. But yes, data integrity is here to stay. The more that we rely on computers to do a job, the more we're going to be, the FDA is going to be concerned with who's getting access to that data and who has the authority to change it and update it, and can we trust that it's not been tampered with? That's here to stay. That's going to become more and more an issue as time goes on.
Okay. The very first question, I think you might have answered already, about do you have any similar data tabulations on CFR parts 312 and 820? She actually meant 312 and 812. So I don't know if you want to address that, or you already addressed that.
No, wait, hold on a second. I need to see that question. CFR 312 and 812. You know what? I'm assuming you're talking about clinical and preclinical. Those, which of course I'm always talking, most of what I'm doing here is about post-market. But clinical and preclinical, you do need a data integrity program. The FDA is a little more relaxed about it because it's controlled by your clinical evaluation team, your clinical auditors, and then you have an institutional review board, an ethics board, and there's specific requirements there. The one thing that is specified in those types of preclinical programs is that you should have software that has specific user levels and prevents access by unauthorized individuals to assure that data integrity. I hope that answers it.
So I think we get this question every year, so whoever asked this, you are not alone. Do you have an idea if similar data would apply to combo device manufacturers?
Combination device manufacturers, absolutely. So when the FDA comes in and inspects you, combination device, you go to Office of Combination Products and, they kind of determine what you should be. But really, a combination product is both a device and a pharmaceutical product. And it's more of a determination of which program is going to take precedence, and then you have procedures that will fill in the gaps between one and the other. So what you see here is going to be very similar. The FDA is not going to really make much of a distinction, except now you have to comply with both regulations, either by complying with 820 fully and then filling in with the gaps for 210 to 11, or complying with 210 to 11 fully and filling in with the gaps with 820. Or if your combination device is, for instance, a syringe that is filled with pharmaceutical product, then your syringe will have to conform to 820, and your pharmaceutical product that is filled within will be your pharmaceutical. And then you have only a certain amount that would, be regulated for the pre-filled syringe combination. You'll have to do both in some way. So yes, there's no distinction.
Okay. So what is your sense on FDA inspections for cell and gene therapy, since it's kind of new for them? The industry and regulations are still being prepared, yet the demand is increasing and these programs are growing very fast.
Well, gene therapies, of course, they're in a different, a completely different regulation, but for the most part, they will be regulated just like a drug product if it's coming out, but coming out of your body, they're doing something to alter the DNA. It's going back in. Gene therapies, yes, are very up and coming, but there's not going to be like a relaxation of requirements for gene therapy. In fact, it's probably going to be stricter because now you're actually altering the genome. What else are you altering when you insert a gene or change a gene in somebody's genetic makeup? Are there going to be adverse events associated with that? So I think there will be a much more careful evaluation on complaints because there's a higher risk potentially of adverse events. But I don't see there being a distinction in what the FDA is looking for, although the specific regulation may be different. Like for instance, it may be regulated as a biologic.
Okay. So is the FDA performing inspections to companies that are MDSAP certified? Sorry, I think they mean certified there.
Yeah, the MDSAP certification, I think, also carries over to the FDA, being, they are one of the single audit entities that are being covered there. That doesn't mean that the FDA will never come and visit you. If the FDA suspects that there is a public health issue that is associated with your company or one of its products, they can surprise inspect you just like anybody else. But I think that they want to align themselves with MDSAP so that, well, honestly, their inspection burden is too high. They're obviously behind on their inspection schedule now, since it's been 2 years of grossly reduced amount of inspections. They would actually like to be able to align themselves with MDSAP. And in fact, you can find MDSAP information on the FDA website. So yes.
Okay. So this, I like this next question. And I think we could do a whole webinar on this actually. So let's make a note for this. Has remote working added to difficulties in managing documentation effectively?
Well, that is a big question. I will say one thing that has come out of some of the FDA's webinars that I've seen is that they are trying to do some more remote audits. And it takes a lot longer to do a remote audit if you want to hit on all the points than it would be if you were to do an in-person audit. It's a lot faster to be able to look at something directly rather than somebody finding you, some record that's been buried into some database someplace, whatever. Remote working, I think, is the main reason why the number of FDA inspections is less. And I would say that remote working is having an impact. And I've actually attended some webinars discussing remote work and remote audits, and it's slowing people down. Especially if you're in a business where your job is producing a product. And then we also have the supply chain issues that's slowing us down. So yes, it is keeping things from being able to move as efficiently as it should.
Okay. Is data integrity for medical devices related directly to audit trail requirements, or are they referring to other deficiencies for data integrity?
Well, there's that is one of them, is audit trails, and being able to see where your data has been touched and how it's been used. But the other one thing that's actually kind of top of mind for the FDA, and the FDA has 2 guidance documents related to medical device cybersecurity, both for the pre-production, the clinical evaluation side, and also for the actual device itself. Cybersecurity is a big concern, especially since hospitals seem to be the companies that get hacked more frequently than other types of companies. And of course, these companies make a lot of money by going in and hacking and holding a company up with ransomware, and a hospital is willing to pay up because, well, they got sick people, and they can't, if they can't administer care to their sick people, then they're not able to perform their actual reason for existence. So the FDA is concerned about the cybersecurity for the medical device, as well as your being able to substantiate that the data that you are submitting to the FDA for review is truthful and that you stand behind it. So it's more than one area. Yes.
Okay. Can you explain in more detail why there is, sorry, I lost my place over there, why there's a different denominator? Is there more importance as to what system or how the FDA enters the 43?
So this is really weird. So the FDA has a manual system and they have an electronic system. The electronic system that they have for managing their inspections is called Turbo EIR, or Turbo, what they call it, Turbo for short. And they'll pull a lot of data from Turbo to you know, mix and match things. Now that's usually only for US inspections. And it just includes a lot more things than like the manual system that they would be using. And the denominators are different because they're taken from two different data sets, is all I can say. And without actually working in the FDA, I can't get more technical than that. Are there more questions?
Sorry, throwing myself on mute there for a second. My apologies. How do you guide an early stage clinical development biopharma company in performing a supplier risk assessment of raw materials? What are some of the best resources, especially if they want to develop robust supplier qualification programs?
Okay, so I would go look up online. Get yourself a good FMEA tool. You can do, you know, go online, look up FMEA, pull up some good examples, and develop yourself a nice Excel spreadsheet where you can calculate your risk for each of those different types of components that you're trying to purchase. And rate them. You know, you might have like, you know, one thing's a critical component. If this component of this product fails, we're going to definitely see problems with, you know, with the health outcomes of the patient. You'll find some other situations where, you know what, like, let's say you're looking at the type of paper that your label is going to be printed on. Okay, it might be important that the ink doesn't rub off or whatever, but you're pretty much assured that, you know, the paper as a non-product contact type of material might not be as critical, and you might be able to source a secondary supplier for that. Just go through each list, and each list you'll be rating them by, you know, how hazardous would it be if it were not to meet specifications? What would happen if it didn't meet specifications? What systems do you have built in to show that you can meet that? And this is important. You do want to have a supplier rating system, and you might actually purchase more than one material from a supplier. So you might want to just rate it by the supplier, by the most critical component you purchase from that supplier, and then rate the suppliers. And then you have to create a supplier quality agreement that will basically force your supplier to be accountable for the quality of the product that they're giving you based on the risk that you've identified for the products that you purchase from them. And when you have identified those different risks, set up your program so that it's easy to manage. You are focusing on your most critical suppliers. You may have to audit some of them if they're critical. Maybe if they're not so critical, maybe you can just evaluate them by a remote audit or a review of their quality system documentation, or a review of the batch record documentation they provide for the component that you purchase. There should be some flex in there so that you pay more attention to the suppliers that give you greatest concern. But I'd start with an FMEA tool to discern that.
Great question. How important are mock recalls?
I love mock recalls. They are not required, but I love them. Mock recalls are important because if you have a real recall, you want to make sure that you know what the hell you're doing. When you don't do mock recalls, when the real one happens, you mess up and it's ugly and it looks bad. And now you have the FDA potentially traipsing into your facility saying, why did you screw this up? Don't want that happening. It's good to do a mock recall. Test out your system. Make sure it works. If it doesn't work, hey, you haven't lost anything. All you've done is you've done a drill, and that's good.
All right, another great question. And we got a couple more to go, and then I think we're gonna wrap it up. So sort of last call for questions if you have any. Before we do wrap up, I just want to thank you all for attending, and also if at any time we can be of assistance or you think of a question after the fact, which is what I always seem to do, I think about it, I don't know, randomly driving home or doing something. And you can reach out to us anytime. Regina's information was on the previous slide. You can always reach out to her or us through complianceteamllc.com. So definitely, please feel free, even after the fact, you think of something, reach out. We're here to help. We're big. One of our big culture things is servant leadership, and we definitely want to help serve you guys and help you in your journey to success. So on with that, with the next question. Did supply chain issues caused by COVID contribute to FDA warning letters to the pharma and or medical industries? I feel like you kind of talked about this already, but if you have anything else you want to add.
No, really, the COVID warning letters were not necessarily related to supply chain. I mean, we do have supply chain issues. We're going to be coming up very soon with in 2023 with full implementation of the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. And of course, we are still kind of struggling with unique device identifiers, which FDA for now is using enforcement discretion on enforcing, which means it's law, but they are choosing not to consider it a high priority during investigations. That's not going to stay that way. But supply chain, I think the biggest supply chain issues with drug and medical device are with those products that are considered, in short supply. Things like just a basic sterile ringer solution that, what happens when you go to a hospital, the first thing they do is they hang an IV bag on the patient. Whether the patient needs medicine or not, they hang an IV bag on that patient because they want to make sure that if they need to push some meds into that patient, they have a vehicle for it immediately. Leads to a drug shortage of something as simple as ringer solution. And there are other types of drugs that may have been in short supply related to, treatment of COVID. I think right now medical oxygen is one of them. But the FDA doesn't really enforce you need to speed up production of medical oxygen. That's not going to be a warning letter finding or a 483 finding, because it's more important to the FDA that whatever gets released to the market is safe and effective. Whether there's enough of it, they're trying to create programs that encourage companies to maybe enter those markets that haven't yet entered them at some point. But it's not an enforcement issue.
Okay, and I think this brings us to our last question. Thank you everyone again for attending. And I saved for last, regarding qualification of computer systems, are there differences in the FDA expectations of backup and restore processes for cloud-based systems? Again, I think that kind of leads into that whole session about documentation and remote work, and we could probably talk about it in another session, but
that's a really great question.
It is a great question.
because in the past, you would back up and restore your own data and have your own system of being able to do some kind of a backup, and you could verify that it was being done. And nowadays, you're kind of offloading that to a third entity. And this is something that's made me very, very, very nervous in the past. Because these third-party cloud computing companies don't know anything about FDA regulations. So what are you to do? Well, you got to do kind of what I was talking about before with a risk assessment for a vendor, because that is basically what a cloud computing company is. They are a vendor that you have to include in a risk assessment. And what is the risk to your company if you're to lose that data? And is that cloud computing entity able to share with you their backup procedures or anything pertaining to their backups to make you reasonably sure that you will not lose your information? And you've hit on a very concerning part of data integrity. It is not an easily answerable question, because you had lost significant control over your own data by cloud computing. So yes, it is a concern. It should be part of your supplier qualification program. I think that there are some companies out there who use the cloud and they are Part 11 compliant, or so they claim to be. They claim to be well versed in FDA regulations. I would focus, if you're looking for a cloud computing solution for management and storage of your data, to focus on those entities. And don't just trust Google. I mean, Google has a great deal of expertise in computing, but I don't entirely trust them because they're for general use and not really for pharmaceutical, medical device, or anything that's public health impacting use. It's not what they're designed for. They're designed for user access, not user security. It's my opinion.
Okay, great questions, everyone. Thank you again so much for your time today. Stay tuned. We've been doing monthly webinars. We will have one approximately March 24th. So if you're on our mailing list or following us on social media, LinkedIn, you should be seeing some news about that coming shortly. Next month's session is going to be an Ask the Expert session on CAPA. So I think it should be a pretty interesting session as well. It's going to be sort of a flipped format, and we will be short presentation with the majority of the time spent being able to ask expert panelists questions that you might have and want to ask them. So thanks so much. We hope you have a great day, and we will see you next month. Bye.
Thank you so much, everybody. Look to hear from you next time.
Thanks, Regina.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.